Okay, folks, here's the vocabulary for credit 6. We're talking about statistics now with two variables, and a fancy word for two variables is bivariate, which you can kind of see in the word. Bicycle has two wheels, so bivariate, two variables. One main way to look at the data with two variables is to put them into a scatter plot. So a scatter plot is points that are plotted in a coordinate plane based on the two variables, and this is kind of a scatter plot right here. When we look at the data, it's useful to have some explanations of how they lay out. So one way is to say they have a positive correlation, and that's when the line is going up and to the right. If you kind of track the data points, if they seem to be growing in both directions. So example of that would be I don't know, like the age versus height, right? The older you are, the taller you are, but at some point it's going to flatten out, right? Negative correlation means the more that this grows, the lower this gets. So example of that might be the volume of the balloon versus time. So the volume of the balloon starts really big, but as time goes on, the balloon shrinks and gets smaller. So that would be a negative correlation. No correlation is just when you have a bunch of scatter and there's no real line that you can draw that would make sense for the data. Now, there are interesting relationships still to look at, like what does this point mean and what does this point mean? Even if there's no correlation between the two variables, it still will be interesting to ask questions about, what do these points over here mean? This means that this one is, as this one's bigger, this one is also big. So these are kind of like the extremes, and then down here, this one would be, extreme in another case. Okay, if you can see a pattern with the points, if there's a point that is outside of that pattern, we call that an outlier. So an outlier is a point that doesn't fit the pattern. So those are the different vocabulary words that we'll be looking at for this credit.